Officially, inauguration is 1 week from today. That's when the incoming president is, as always, sworn in. It's a moment of true living history. You saw it there in the Obama era. The nation watches the new president walk up there and take the oath. Of course, this will be Trump's second time. The latest New Yorker magazine cover has a political satire imagining the coming moment a week away with Trump edged out of the frame. That's just a little bit of his face and tuft of hair you see there. And look who's doing the edging. It is Elon Musk pushing him out of the frame as the main character. You could call this political cartoon satire a kind of commander of the chief. And it is a joke. Political cartoons have a long history, but the joke plays on some real concerns about this unelected billionaire wielding so much power. Now, Musk's spending advisory group has started talking to government staff. They're the ones inside the government who actually will shape the spending decision. Musk is using his group's name to promote crypto he owns. We did a special fact check on that. He's also signaling some of those big claims about cuts that he made were overstated. He also juggles conflicts of interest because his companies have so many of their own contracts with government agencies as he demands spending cuts, but not for his own many government contracts. Meanwhile, billionaires and tech leaders are jostling to appease a brash leader who demands loyalty over truth. There are some comparisons here to George Orwell's 1984, the infamous book and movie later, and its depiction of an oppressive, overly powerful government. So if you say, gosh, is it a little early to be going Orwell? We're a week out of inauguration. Well, I can tell you one of the Orwell comparisons is actually coming from a Trump ally, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg, but he was describing in a new interview the federal guidelines against medical and vaccine misinformation.
Something out of 1984, one of these books where it's just like, it really is a slippery slope.
That is Zuckerberg's idea of an Orwellian attack. He was talking about mostly Biden-era COVID policy in his new interview with very Trump-friendly podcaster Joe Rogan. Although when it comes to government overreach, while Zuckerberg is playing the Orwell card on the outgoing administration, it was Donald Trump who embarrassed Zuckerberg by announcing quite recently that he, the president-elect, thinks the Facebook founder bowed to Trump, because of his past threats.
Do you think he's directly responding to the threats that you have made to him in the past?
Probably. Yeah, probably.
Probably. Yeah. That's serious stuff. It would be up to Mark Zuckerberg to publicly rebut that claim if it is not true. Trump had threatened to literally jail Zuckerberg. And as with so many other Trump claims, vows, and threats, we have to deal in evidence. You don't have to overreact to every post on Truth Social, but you have to deal seriously with someone who is a week away from becoming the commander-in-chief. And I can tell you this, if you haven't seen it, there are reports Facebook took it seriously after those comments. Meta's security teams analyzed how Trump could weaponize DOJ and intelligence against Zuckerberg. That's according to a person who anonymously spoke to CNBC with knowledge of the situation. So, Zuckerberg's team took it seriously. Zuckerberg also now adding a Trump ally to his company board, and he has cited Trump's win directly as his reason to end fact-checking online, which had reduced the belief of Facebook users in certain lies and had also affected their spread. Here was that unusual announcement.
First, we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes similar to X, starting in the US. We're going to work with President Trump. We're going to catch less bad stuff, but we'll also reduce the number of innocent people's posts and accounts that we accidentally take down.
We won't catch as much bad stuff. We're going to end fact-checking. And all why? Not because of some independent reason or even a business reason, which, of course, businesses make business decisions about profits all the time. In fact, we've aggressively covered the facts around Zuckerberg and Facebook's conduct on that score around the world for years. But he didn't give a business reason. He just said because of the election. Now, Zuckerberg's making a big show of turning towards MAGA and this Trump alliance. We can report that he met with Trump on Friday. You could see his private jet. This has been identified, credit to the New York Post there, as Zuckerberg's jet that he was using that day next to what you see there, Trump's. And here's a little more from that new Zuckerberg-Joe Rogan interview.
It was just never accepted by people broadly. I think people just felt like the fact checkers were too biased. Not necessarily even so much in what they ruled, although sometimes I think people would disagree with that. A lot of the time, it was just what types of things they chose to even go and fact check in the first place. So, I kind of think, like, after having gone through that whole exercise, it I don't know, it's something out of, like, 1984, one of these books where it's just like it really is a slippery slope, and it just got to a point where it's just, okay, this is destroying so much trust, especially in the United States.
So there you have it. If you're keeping track of the dystopian name calling, well, Zuckerberg got in, started the year early, saying the other people are Orwellian. Now, as I've mentioned, there are things people don't like about all kinds of companies and what they do. This is not the government directly, although clearly Zuckerberg is trying to curry favor with the incoming government, but he is saying that he'll reshape Facebook and Instagram basically towards what Trump wants. Elon Musk already did that when he took over Twitter. And that means a majority of social media users in America are going to now see a different stream of information tilted towards those goals. If you care about the truth, if you are interested in why and how people are learning things, then whatever you use to get the truth and facts and information, say possibly multiple news sources or accredited journalists, it's good to keep track of the fact that a lot of other people are going to be getting this. And a heck of a lot of people don't read a lot of news directly. They go on the internet and see what comes to them. Now then, the other most popular social site, and this is important, I've just talked to you about a couple of them, now I'm turning to another one, is a site you've heard of that has not yet, at least, not announced the kind of political change that we've heard from Musk and Zuckerberg. And that's TikTok. And there are many fair concerns about that site. We've covered that too. But TikTok has been a big platform for people across the spectrum, left, right, and in between, in America to share views on the presidential debates, on politics, civil rights, abortion rights, all kinds of issues. In fact, we've often aired clips from the robust political activity on that site in our coverage, because we have pulled the videos and shown you what people are talking about, and oftentimes what Americans are saying back and forth. But that remaining non-Musk, non-Zuckerberg, non-MAGA platform is now facing its own deadline to completely shut down U.S. operations if its Chinese parent company does not sell its U.S. part. The Chinese company ByteDance is saying it will just shut down to comply with the new U.S. law by next week. So this is a huge deal. It's probably gotten less attention than other things. It'll be a really big deal if it happens. A last-ditch appeal to keep TikTok open has just hit the Supreme Court. And the justices had a bunch of questions which led many to think that this court will allow the TikTok ban. In other words, they will not step in and save TikTok next week. Now, here's a quick key moment where the Chief Justice suggests the court may view this as more of a national security priority, where the United States can and has every right to step in and use its power to block what it believes are basically Chinese intelligence operations. So it's not really about, according to the question, American speech.
ByteDance, subject to Chinese laws that require it to assist or cooperate with the Chinese government's intelligence work. So are we supposed to ignore the fact that the ultimate parent is in fact subject to doing intelligence work for the Chinese government?
That is a big question stated clearly. That's the Chief Justice of the United States saying, you've got an adversarial intelligence operation, and it's on tens of millions, hundreds of millions of Americans' phones potentially, and the Congress wants to stop that, and you're asking us to say they can't? Legally, the point is simple. If this app is gathering intel for an adversary, the U.S. government can block that, period. That's what the Congress argued in its powers, and that's what the Chief Justice right there seemed to be sympathetic to. Now, let me play for you the answer in part. I'm keeping it pretty simple, although we've jumped around through a bunch of social sites right now that are going to define how your neighbors and maybe you see the world in the coming years in the Trump era. Here's TikTok's lawyer saying, no, wait a minute. Has Congress ever shut down an entire speech platform?
This is a pretty unprecedented case. I'm not aware of any time in American history where the Congress has tried to shut down a major speech platform.
That's a decent answer. And the times they are a-changing. So just because Congress never did it or even had the technological know-how to do it, because now you can block app stores and other things from serving up the app, serving up TikTok, doesn't mean they can't do it to meet new threats. And that's how the Congress originally viewed TikTok, as a Chinese-backed intelligence threat. Yes, there's a lot of speech on it, but they argued, well, the back door was for an adversary. And yet, if this were a movie, as with so many other stories in the last few years, you might say, gosh, we're jamming a lot in. So you're telling me there's basically 3 big social media platforms, 2 go MAGA, and the other one's about to shut down on the eve of the swearing in of the new president that I showed you at the beginning of this introduction? It's not all a conspiracy. It's not all coordinated. Some of these laws, as I mentioned, were written long before anyone knew the outcome of the election, but it is all coming at us fast, and it is a heck of a lot of billionaire, tax-cutting, pro-MAGA pressure to change whether you get information and whether other people have any kind of fact-checking.